know me, my name is Jeff Ferguson. I'm a Spokane Tribal member and a full-time freelance photo and videographer. The reason I'm here is to share kind of my experience that I had at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt this year. Tremendous experience that I really feel blessed to have been a part of. Some of the footage that I'm going to share with you today was filmed for a sunrise ceremony at the top of Mount Sinai. I was brought to film a group called Earthrise Collective, which is a group of Indigenous spiritual leaders from all over the world. To kind of summarize my part in it, I followed an Incan medicine man up Mount Sinai through the night to film the sunrise ceremony. You'll see these guys here in just a little bit. But there's a lot of things that happened, and I'm really going to try to whip through this because in the 24 days that I was in Egypt, I shot 2.5 terabytes of footage. I was able to whittle it down to a little bit, and this is about 10 minutes or so, but it really just scratches the surface. And when you look at the bigger picture, when we look at an indigenous perspective of what's happening at the Global Climate Summit, a lot of it has to do with hegemony, you know, the haves and the have-nots, and the way that organization like the UN can structure a conference and really look at it strategically and be able to say, okay, well, these guys, their voice isn't good enough, they don't have enough money, they don't have enough input or say-so, and they're not really considered a credible stakeholder. And so that's kind of what I wanted to introduce to you. But before I show this video, I want you to understand something. When we first got to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, we had made reservations in a bed and breakfast 4 months in advance to go there. When we went to check in, 3 days before we checked in, Booking.com had sent us a cancellation notice for our reservation. And you know, we're like 7,000 miles from home. And so they sent us a link to rebook us for $7,000 more than what we originally had booked it for. Then, because we realized that we didn't have that kind of funding, we got on with the U.S. Climate Action Network and tried to find somebody that had a reservation that we're going to be able to use. We found a guy out of New Jersey that had prepaid for 2 weeks for the COP. He had paid $1,700 to this hotel in advance. When we went to check in that night, they came out and told us that yes, they had already received the money, and yes, they already had the reservation, but it was going to cost us an extra $700 a night to stay there. At that price, for the 2 weeks we would have been there, that would have been an increase in our lodging budget of $9,000 over the duration. And this is just to give you a good example of how you can keep the voices of people that really need to be heard away. There were a lot of people that ended up staying on couches, people that we actually ended up taking in another guy. We found an Airbnb from a pastor out of the South. I think he was from Georgia, but he had a friend that came in from New York that ended up staying with us and sleeping on the couch too. But there were people that had to turn around and go home. There were people that had to book a hotel in Cairo, which is kind of a journey to Sharm el-Sheikh, and to go back and forth every day and back and forth every day. It was really an enlightening experience. But I'm going to let you, the first part of this I'm going to share with you was my friend that went to the Biden speech, and him and 3 Native youth went in there, and well, you'll see it. But I want you to see that perspective and understand that perspective. And then afterwards, towards the end of it, is this group that brought us there called Earthrise. The Earthrise Collective is a kind of a dream of Hooven Moodley, who is a 4th generation Indian from South Africa, whose family was brought to India, or brought from India and enslaved in South Africa. He had worked his way out of slavery and through law school and fought the Shell Corporation in a major lawsuit for the indigenous people of South Africa and won. And that kind of motivated him to start gathering what we call the wisdom keepers and these ancestors that you'll see here in just a minute. So I'll go ahead and show that, and I might have a couple comments after that, but I just kind of want to keep the ball moving. But thank you for coming today. Thank you for
and do what needs to be done.
All right, so this is Earthrise here. Within Earthrise, there's a group of what they call wisdom keepers, which include a few different people. So some of the key people that were within this organization was Jay Naidu. He's in the very back row with a white t-shirt. He's the former communications minister to Nelson Mandela. If you look at the gentleman in the in the yellow, about 2 over, in his full regalia. He's the Prince of Benin. We had the founder of Oceanic Global, and originally Earthrise is 60 people that were invited for the 3rd convening in Dahab, Egypt. That's what this was. 42 people responded, 39 of us showed up, and we spent 10 days there, holding ceremony at the Red Sea and praying. And they're really looking to expand and go bigger with it. They're trying to do their own COP because COP really lost its effectiveness. One of the guys up here is a guy by the name of Rajendra. He's the India waterman, and they credit him with saving 13 rivers in India. But he was at the very first COP and said that the whole COP idea lost its effectiveness around COP 7 or 8. But just out of respect for time, I'm going to wrap it up. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those for you. And I'm sorry that I went over on these guys. I didn't realize it was longer than it